Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're tackling a big one, the story of one of the largest and honestly most influential empires in all of world history, the Roman Empire. For over 500 years, Rome didn't just rule the Western world. In a lot of ways, it was the Western world. This was an empire built on the back of an absolutely unrivaled army, and with engineering skills so advanced, they left everyone else in the dust. But it's a story of so much more than just legions and roads. I think everyone feels like they know the story of Rome, right? But the real key, the secret ingredient, was their total control of the sea and a mastery of logistics on a scale that's just, well, it's almost unimaginable. Without that, the empire simply wouldn't have existed. But even when they were at the absolute height of their power, this massive superpower had this hidden vulnerability, a kind of Achilles heel that could bring the whole thing crashing down. And that weakness was its own capital city, Rome. It was a ticking time bomb. So the heart of Rome's problem wasn't some invading army from the outside. No, it was something much, much more basic. The city faced this logistical nightmare that could bring the entire empire to its knees. And it all came down to food. I mean, think about this. By the 1st century AD, Rome was the biggest city the world had ever seen. The population had just exploded to 1 million people. And to feed those million people, you needed a staggering amount of grain. We're talking 300 million tons every single year, just for the capital. Because if those people went hungry, they didn't just write letters of complaint. They rioted. And in Rome, riots meant emperors could lose their power and, pretty often, their lives. So keeping that grain flowing wasn't just good policy, it was pure survival. So for centuries, historians were totally stumped. How in the world did Rome pull this off? They knew there had to be a gigantic port somewhere, but its location was a complete mystery. It was as if it had just vanished. Well, the answer to that mystery was literally buried for almost 2 millennia. And its rediscovery is this incredible story of archaeological detective work, unearthing a secret that was absolutely essential to the success of Rome itself. Finding it was like something out of a movie. It all started with these little clues in ancient texts that mentioned a great port. This led archaeologists to this really strange, perfectly man-made hexagonal lake, but it was miles from the current coastline. And that was the final piece of the puzzle. They realized the entire coastline had shifted over 2,000 years, and they were standing on what used to be the Roman shorefront. And what they found, wow, the full scale of this place, Portus, was just staggering. This wasn't just a dock, this was a massive statement of absolute power and control. That hexagonal basin was the heart of the whole operation, a purpose-built facility to handle dozens of huge cargo ships all at once, unloading the grain that kept the capital alive. And all of this was possible because of a Roman supermaterial. See, they figured out that if you add a specific volcanic ash, which they shipped all the way across the Mediterranean, it created a type of concrete that could actually harden underwater. This hydraulic concrete let them build massive harbors like Portus on nothing but shifting sand. It was a total game changer for engineering. But here's the great irony, right? The very systems, the expansion, the control, the incredible logistics that made Rome so powerful also held the seeds of its own destruction. The empire's success created new and, as it turns out, fatal problems. As Rome just kept getting bigger and bigger, it became a victim of its own success. This massive territory became pretty much impossible to govern effectively, and you started to see these cracks appear in the foundations. The empire's peak and its decline really were two sides of the same Roman coin. The very strengths that built it up eventually became these crippling weaknesses. The military that conquered the world became a massive financial black hole, and that strong central rule just fell apart into chaos. And politically, things just completely evaporated. This one chaotic year was really just a preview of what was coming. The 3rd century saw this full-blown crisis, with over 20 men claiming to be emperor in just 75 years. In this new Rome, the most common way you lost the top job was by assassination. So you have this perfect storm brewing. The military had to hire mercenaries, often from the very barbarian tribes they were supposed to be fighting. And of course, these soldiers had zero loyalty to Rome. You combine that with a government in constant, violent chaos, well, it was a recipe for disaster. At that point, the empire was just too large, and its problems were too deep to solve. The end didn't come with one single dramatic bang. It was more like a long, slow decline that went on for centuries. First, the Emperor Diocletian split the empire in two, basically admitting, hey, this thing is way too big for one person to rule. After the death of Emperor Theodosius, that split became permanent. The western half, the one with Rome in it, crumbled first, officially ending in 476. But the eastern half, the Byzantine Empire, amazingly, it held on for another 1,000 years. But here's the fascinating thing. Even after the government itself fell, the idea of Rome, it lived on. Its influence is still echoing through our world today in everything from our languages and legal systems to the very design of our buildings. Even the Roman Catholic Church, which grew powerful in the late empire, outlived it by millennia. So when you look at the foundations of our legal systems, or the roots of our languages, or even the architecture of our government buildings, you really have to wonder. Yeah, the Roman Empire may have fallen over 1,500 years ago, but while its physical empire might be gone, its cultural one, in so many ways, never really did.